Hello everybody. In this lecture we are going to talk about the visual pathway as well as the light reflex or pupillary reflex and the eye movement. In my last lecture I explained how the optic nerve is formed, right? And through the optic disc it gets out. So from two eyes, right and left eyes, two optic nerves come out, right? So this is your left eye and this is your right eye. Okay, so the optic nerves come out, and if you see the retina of your right and left eyes, we can divide the retina into two halves. This is your right side, so right hemiretina. This is your left side, so let me use a different color. This is left hemiretina of your left eye. Okay, so this eye is the left eye, this right eye is the right eye, and then again this is the left half of the retina or hemiretina of your right eye, and then your right hemiretina of your right eye. Okay, good. So if I draw the visual field for your right and left eyes separately, just to explain better, so I can divide. This is the visual field of your right eye visual field, and this is the visual field for your left eye. Okay, left visual field. Now from this left side of your left visual field, the light will go to the right hemiretina of your left eye. Make sense? And from your right half of your left visual field, the stimulus or light will go to the left hemiretina. Okay, so we can also divide. This is the right half of your left visual field, this is the left half, right? And this is the right half of your right visual field, and this is the left half of your left eye's visual field. Okay, so that is one. Now let's see the other side. So we can say that same way, from the left half of your right eye's visual field, the stimulus will go to the right hemiretina of your right eye, and from the right half of your right eye's visual field will go to the left hemiretina of your right eye. Makes sense, right? So that's how the light will fall on the retina. Okay, And then if I draw now from this side, this is the nasal side, right? And this is the temporal side, and this is the nasal side, this is the nasal side, this is the temporal side. Okay, so from the nasal side, the signal will get out through the optic nerve and will go to the other side. Okay, however, from the temporal side of the retina, the signal will stay in the same side. Okay, same thing here. Let me use a different color, that would be helpful. Okay, so let's say from the nasal retina of right eye will go to the opposite side, and from this temporal side will stay in the same side. Make sense? So this one will stay in the same side, this one will cross, will go to the opposite side, and also this one will cross, right, and will go to the opposite side, and this one will stay in the same side. Okay, and the red one, this one has crossed to the left side. Okay, so the nasal side's fibers will cross to the opposite side. Make sense? Same thing here, nasal side's fibers will cross to the opposite side. Okay, this part is the optic nerve. This is the right, this is the left, right? And this part where the crossover takes place, this part is called the chiasma here, or chiasm. So we can say optic chiasma or chiasma or chiasm. Okay, then so here some crossover, significant, about 60% fibers cross over. Okay, go to the other side, 40% fibers stay in the same side. And then after the crossover, next is the tract. So this is the optic tract. So in the optic tract you have the fibers from both eyes. That means from the temporal retina of same eye and the nasal retina of the opposite. Okay, so this is very important, right? The crossover. And then what happens, the optic tract gives the signal to the lateral geniculate nucleus or body of the thalamus. So this is the lateral geniculate nucleus or lateral geniculate body of the thalamus. Okay, now in the lateral geniculate nucleus you have 6 layers. Okay, so 1 2 3 4 5 6, same in this side, 2 3 4 5 6. So if we just number 1 4 6, right? And this way 2, 3, 5. Layer number 2, 3, 5 and 1, 4, 6. Same thing this way, in this side. So what happens here, the signal are still not combined. That means the layers will keep the signal from two eyes separated. So from the same side's eye, that means the temporal fibers here, same sides will give the signal to the layer number 2, layer number 3 and layer number 5. So layer number 2, 3 and 5 will get signal from ipsilateral, that means same side's eye. In this case, right eye, ipsilateral. Make sense? And now let's see the contralateral fibers will give the signal to the layer number 1, 4 and 6. 6, 4, 1. Okay, so you see that the signal is still processed separately, coming from separate eyes in separate layers. Same thing here, right? So contralateral layer 1, 4, 6, 1, 4, 6, and ipsilateral 2, 3, 5. Make sense? So ipsi will go to layer 2, layer 3 and layer 5. Okay, and you must remember in last lecture when I talked about different types of ganglion cells, I said that there are magnocellular, parvocellular and quinocellular layers in the lateral geniculate nucleus. So these are lateral geniculate nucleus receive the signal from the optic tract fibers. Okay, and here something interesting happens. This is the area of your midbrain. Okay, so this is the midbrain area, and in this midbrain area you have few important structures. Okay, so first you have two superior colliculi in corpora quadrigemina. You know, in the back of the midbrain you have two superior colliculi, two inferior colliculi. Here I am showing the superior colliculi because these are related to the movement of the eye. So from the superior colliculi the signal goes to the oculomotor nucleus, trochlear nucleus and abducens nucleus, from where the oculomotor, trochlear and abducens nerves, cranial nerves arise. Okay, so superior colliculus, right and left. This is the left superior colliculus, this is the right superior colliculus. Okay, and superior colliculus receives signal from the lateral geniculate nucleus. So from here the signal, some signal, small amount, goes to the superior colliculi, right and left, and from the superior colliculi the signal goes to the nuclei of those three cranial nerves, and you already know those three cranial nerves. regulate the eye movement, regulate the extraocular or extrinsic eye muscles, right? Oculomotor is the main, and also trochlear and abducens. Okay, so that is one. Also, signal from the lateral geniculate nucleus goes to two other structures in the midbrain. So I am showing here by red. These are called pretectal nuclei. Okay, so right and left. Pretectal nucleus. Okay, very important. So pretectal nuclei receive signal from the lateral geniculate nucleus, okay, of the respective side. And then the last structures I am showing here, these are also very important by green. These are called the Edinger Wasteful nuclei. So let me just write this way: Edinger Wasteful. Okay. Edinger Wasteful nucleus. Okay. Now what happens here, you see, this is very important, that from the pretectal nucleus the signal goes to the Edinger Wasteful nucleus of same side as well as to the opposite side. So here crossover takes place, very important, remember. Okay, so from the pretectal nucleus signal goes to the same sides Edinger Wasteful nucleus as well as to the opposite sides. So some crossover takes place here, and that's why, you know, when pupillary reflex occurs, both pupil constrict. Even if I put light on one eye, both eyes pupil constrict, right? So because of this crossover, make sense? Okay, so now what happens, the Edinger Wasteful nucleus, you see here, sends signal to, let me draw this way, to the Ciliary Ganglion. Okay, so the Edinger Wasteful nucleus sends signal via these parasympathetic fibers to the ciliary ganglion. So here synapse or relay takes place, okay, in the ganglion. You know, ganglion is the round structure in the peripheral nervous system where the relay of signal takes place, right? So this is the right ciliary ganglion and this is the left ciliary ganglion. Make sense? And what kind of fibers are these? Parasympathetic. Okay, parasympathetic fibers go from the Edinger Wasteful to the ciliary ganglion. neurons of the ciliary ganglion will receive that signal. Okay, and then the axons of these neurons form the short ciliary nerves. So you see, these are the nerves arising from the ciliary ganglion, usually 6 to 8 short ciliary nerves. They pierce through the sclera, the outermost covering, and enter into the wall of the eyeball. Make sense? So these are what? Short ciliary nerves. Okay, 6 to 8, and they further branch. So they pierce or pass through the covering of the outer covering or sclera of the eye and will enter. And after they enter into the eye, wall of the eye, they will run through the space or the area between the sclera and choroid. You remember the layers of the wall of the eyeball, right? The outer is the sclera and middle is the choroid. So they will move forward and run between the sclera and the choroid. Okay, and here they will innervate the ciliary muscle, or ciliary body, and the iris. Okay, so now if I put, you see here, if I put light, let's say this is the source of light, I am putting light on this nasal hemiretina. Okay, then what will happen? The light from this side, nasal hemiretina of your left eye, will go to the opposite side, right? Because these fibers cross over in the optic chiasma, so we'll go to the opposite side. And from the lateral geniculate nucleus will enter into the pretectal nucleus, and then from there we'll go to same sides as well as opposite sides Edinger Wasteful nucleus, right? And from these two Edinger Wasteful nuclei, they will go to respective sides ciliary ganglion, and from the ciliary ganglion the short ciliary nerves will go to the ciliary body muscle and the iris, those two muscles. Make sense? So that will cause the constriction of the pupil, make sense, as well as the constriction of the ciliary muscle. So parasympathetic fibers will cause the constriction of the pupil as well as the constriction of the ciliary muscle. So let me now draw this. So again, to make it more clear, again this is your eye. I am just drawing one eye this time. Okay, this is the cornea, and you know that I'm just only drawing the choroid, the middle layer that forms the ciliary muscle. So this is the ciliary muscle. Okay, and again the choroid, the middle layer, and the ciliary muscle, Okay, ciliary muscle. Okay, and you know that from the ciliary muscle, the suspensory ligaments, right, or zonular ligaments, they arise, and this is the lens, right, and pull the lens from around, okay, to keep it kind of flat. Okay, and also we know that the choroid goes to the front and form the iris. Makes sense? So the iris has two types of muscles, you already know. This is the pupil, and around the pupil you have the circular or sphincter pupillae muscle, and then around that you have the dilator pupillae or radial muscle fibers. Okay, so this is the sphincter pupillae, this is the dilator pupillae muscle. Okay, two muscles, or we can say inner circular constrictor muscle and outer radial dilator muscles. Okay, so this part is the inner sphincter pupillae, okay, and this is the dilator pupillae. Okay, so now let's get back to this where we stopped here. I mentioned that the short ciliary nerves. So this is the ciliary ganglion. So short ciliary parasympathetic nerves will enter into the wall and will do what? Run between the sclera and choroid like this, and will innervate the ciliary muscle or ciliary body as well as the iris. Okay, so these two structures get the parasympathetic innervation from the ciliary ganglion. Okay, okay, now when the light stimulates this parasympathetic innervation, what will happen? You see here, the ciliary body or ciliary muscle constricts. Now something interesting happens here. This end of the ciliary muscle is fixed, will not move, and this end is moving. Okay, same thing here, this end is fixed and this part moves. Okay, so when the parasympathetic stimulation will arrive due to the introduction of light, then what happens here, you see this end will move forward. Okay, will get shorter, will move this way. This end will move this way. Okay, so when that happens, you see these zonular ligaments will get closer to the lens because they are moving towards the lens this way. Makes sense? So we'll get loose. Okay, so when this end moves forward, the fibers get loose or relaxed, and that will do what? Make the lens more round. So this lens will become more round. Makes sense? And you already know from my last lecture that when the lens gets more round, that accommodates the near objects better. Okay, so this will help in accommodation and see the near objects better. Make sense? So help in near vision. So that light reflex will do the accommodation, will make the lens more bulge or round, and the refraction will be more, and that will help in near vision. Okay. Now what will happen in iris? So also parasympathetic nerves, ciliary nerve fibers innervate in the constrictor pupillae, that means inner circular muscle of the iris, and will cause the constriction of the pupil. Make sense? So two actions we will get when the light reflex occurs. One is the accommodation, what happens in this case, parasympathetic activation will make the lens more round, because the ciliary muscle will contract, and that will relax the suspensory ligament, will let the lens get more round, and that will help in near vision. Okay, number 2, constriction of the pupil. Constriction of the pupil due to the contraction of the sphincter pupillae or circular muscle of the iris. Okay, and that's how the light makes the pupil smaller, constricts the pupil. And if I put light in one eye, both eyes pupil constrict because of that crossover, right? So crossover is very important. Okay, makes sense? So now opposite things will occur if sympathetic stimulation occurs. Okay, so sympathetic stimulation comes from the cervical sympathetic ganglion. Let me show you how. You all know that the spinal cord, so let's start from the spinal cord. So this is the cross section of the spinal cord. Okay, and inside the spinal cord you have the gray matter, outer part is the white matter. Okay, so I am now drawing this butterfly shaped structure, that is the gray matter. So this is gray and this is white. Okay, and in each side of the gray matter you see there are ventral horn, dorsal horn and lateral horn. In the lateral horn, this is important here for this purpose. So these are the neurons in the lateral horn. Lateral horn of the gray matter has the neurons. Okay, and these are the sympathetic neurons. Sympathetic neurons, and the axons of these neurons will go to the sympathetic ganglions. Okay, and there are cervical and thoracic sympathetic ganglions. So since these fibers will go to the eye, So cervical, that means in neck area, upper part of the sympathetic chain of ganglions, will receive the signal. So this is the cervical ganglion, a type sympathetic. Makes sense? And these neurons here will receive that signal. Makes sense? And then the axons of these sympathetic ganglion neurons will form the long ciliary nerves. Long ciliary nerves. Okay, and same way they will pierce through the sclera and will run with the short ciliary nerve. Makes sense? Same thing in this side. Okay, long ciliary nerve. So this is short ciliary nerve, this is long ciliary nerve. Short ciliary, long ciliary. Okay, and long ciliary is sympathetic. Short is what? Parasympathetic, we already talked about, right? And sympathetic activation occurs mainly due to fight or flight response, during fight or flight type response of the body. If you see something very scary very close to you, right, coming towards you, then that will trigger the fight or flight response, and the adrenaline is released, right, and that will activate the sympathetic nerve, and that will do what I just mentioned, opposite of parasympathetic. Makes sense? So in this case the ciliary muscle will relax. So what will happen, when the ciliary muscle will relax, then the ligaments, zonular or suspensory ligaments, will pull the lens outwards. So what will happen, the lens will get flat. Instead of round, the lens will get more flat, just opposite of parasympathetic. So when the lens gets flat, that helps in far object, seeing the far object, and that actually makes sense. When you are scared, you look around, right, more to escape or decide what to do. So you see around quickly, and that is helped by this flat lens. Makes sense? Far vision. Okay, that is one. So the lens will get more flat. That is the accommodation part, and the pupil will get dilated. Allow more light to enter. Okay, so that's how the sympathetic and parasympathetic stimulation activate the ciliary muscle and the iris, and help in accommodation as well as to constrict or dilate the pupil. Make sense? Okay. Now let's go back to the first picture here. From lateral geniculate nucleus, two groups of fibers go to the primary visual cortex. So I am drawing, this is one group of fibers. Okay, this one will run through the temporal lobe of the brain. Okay, so this is the inferior fibers, because temporal lobe is inferior, right? And another group of fibers will run along the parietal lobe of the brain, that means the superior group of fibers, parietal. Okay, and here is your occipital lobe, right, and calcarine sulcus and or calcarine fissure. We say fissure more often. So here respective sides, primary visual cortex or V1, which is also known as striate cortex, in the back of the occipital lobe. You know that primary visual cortex, right? So striate cortex, and you have the calcarine fissure here. So these fibers are also known as geniculo-calcarine fibers. Makes sense, right? So from the geniculus, lateral geniculus nucleus to the calcarine. So geniculo-calcarine fibers, also known as optic radiation. Okay, same thing. So that's how the signal from the eyes reach to the primary visual cortex. This now you know the entire pathway. So now if I show you what would happen if lesion occurs in the visual pathway, anywhere in the visual pathway, then what will happen? Okay, to show that I'll just clean some of these writings. That way it will be better for you to understand. Make sense? Okay, let's see how much I can clean. Okay, good. Let's clean this part too. Okay, perfect. So now let's reconstruct a little bit. So this is same side. I erased some of this, okay, and opposite side. Okay, good. Now this is the optic nerve, right? So if I just make lesion or cut or sever this optic nerve, what will happen? It is simple, right? Let me draw the visual fields here. This is your left and this is your right, and this is the right half, this is the left of your right visual field. This is the right, this is the left. Make sense? Okay, hemifield. So now you see here, if I make section here at point 1, what will happen? This eye's visual field is intact, so this is intact, no problem, and this side's hemifields will be affected. Make sense? So because this part is going to the same sides nasal hemiretina, and this one is going to same eyes temporal hemiretina. Makes sense? So if I cut here at point 1, then one eye's visual field will be affected or will be blind, and that is called the monocular hemianopia. And which sides? Right sides, right? So this is right monocular hemianopia. Makes sense? If I cut here, then that will cause left side's monocular hemianopia. Make sense? Okay, good. Now let's see what will happen if we cut the optic chiasma here. 2. This is the optic chiasma, you know that. So if I cut here, then what will happen? You see, those fibers are going from the nasal hemiretina of your right and left eyes will be affected. Makes sense? So in this case, what will happen? Let me draw again. Okay, so you see nasal sides fibers, that means the temporal sides field. Makes sense? Because nasal sides retina receive the signal from the temporal sides visual field. Okay, so in this case the temporal half of both right and left visual field will be affected. Okay, and this will be termed as bitemporal hemianopia. Makes sense, right? So bitemporal, that means both sides temporal. Bitemporal hemianopia. Makes sense. Okay. Now if I make lesion here in the optic tract, okay, this is right optic tract, right? If I do here, then let's see which fibers are coming here. Okay, the temporal fibers from the same sides and the nasal fibers of the opposite sides retina, right? So the temporal side of same sides retina receives visual signal from the left half of the right visual field. Makes sense? So let me draw here again. This is one left, this is right. So right side of right, left side of right, right side of left, left side of left. Makes sense? So now I have crossed, dissected here. So the fields that will be affected is, let's first see the temporal side of same side's eye, that means the left hemifield. Makes sense? So left side of right, and the contralateral fibers coming from the nasal side, that means the temporal side will be affected in right eye. Makes sense, right? So this will be termed as left homonymous hemianopia. So left homonymous hemianopia. Both eyes, left sides, will be affected. Okay, so this is termed as left homonymous hemianopia. Makes sense, right? So both eyes, left sides, will be affected or will be blind. Okay, now another thing can happen, the condition where internal carotid arteries are actually running in this area, internal carotid. Okay, so if the internal carotid arteries press the fibers here, these are temporal fibers, right, of both sides, so that can cause the lesion of the temporal fibers of both sides, and in that case what will happen? Internal carotid aneurysm can cause that. Okay, internal carotid aneurysm, and that pressure will cause the damage of the temporal fibers of both eyes. Okay, coming from both eyes. So in this case, both sides, both eyes, the nasal hemifield will be affected. Okay, nasal sides will be affected. So we can half will be affected. Makes sense? So this is the nasal half of left, and this is the nasal half of the right. Okay, and this will be termed as, this is simple, all this makes sense, right? By nasal hemianopia. Binasal hemianopia. Okay, now if I destroy this whole geniculocalcarine fibers, both superior and inferior, or temporal and parietal and temporal, then this effect will be same as destroying the optic tract number 3. Okay, so here I can say number 5, this one I can say number 4, aneurysm. Okay, in this case it will be same as number 3, optic tract lesion. Okay, so left homonymous hemianopia, same as number 3, same as number 3. Okay, 2 are affected. Okay, so this is, I am drawing the visual fields, right and left again. So this is right visual field, left visual field. Now I'll divide them, not only right and left halves, I'll also divide them into upper and lower. Okay, so this is right upper, left upper, right lower, left lower. Same way, right upper, right lower, left upper, left lower, upper, lower, upper, lower. Okay, so remember that if this side is affected, then opposite sides, this is the right side, right? So the left side's visual field will be impacted. So let me first show you here. If lesion occurs in these superior fibers, then inferior part will be affected. And since this is the right side superior, so left side's inferior will be affected. So let me see in both eyes. Left side's inferior will be blind. Okay, so this will be termed as the left inferior quadrant hemiplegia. Left inferior, makes sense? Left side's inferior in both eyes, quadrant 1/4 hemianopia. It makes sense, right? So remember that opposite, if right side is affected, then left, and superior will affect the inferior. Now it is easy if I say here, that means left side will be affected because this is right side, but these are inferior fibers, so superior will be affected, right? So left superior, only this one and this one will be affected. Make sense? Okay, so those are the effect of lesion or damage of the fibers in the visual pathway. Okay, so in this section you learned about the visual pathway. You have learned about the reflex response of the lens and the pupil, as well as you have learned the effect of lesion at different areas in the visual pathway. The last thing I will talk about the movement, eye movement. So as you know that there are different types of eye movement, and we already talked about the extrinsic eye muscles or extraocular eye muscles, right? And you know that 3 cranial nerves control those extraocular eye muscles. So this is the eye, okay, pupil, and you know that eyeball, superior rectus, inferior rectus. If this is lateral, this is medial, right? And also you have obliques, superior, inferior obliques. Okay, and I mentioned that from the lateral geniculate nucleus, the signal goes to the superior colliculus, right? Superior colliculus. And from the superior colliculus, signal goes to the nuclei for the cranial nerves. Okay, and you know that 3 cranial nerves, so 3 nuclei. Okay, if this is for one cranial nerve, let's say oculomotor, nerve nucleus. This one is trochlear, nerve nucleus, and this is for abducens. Okay, and oculomotor nerve is the main one, right? It innervates 4 muscles. Let's see if I remember. The superior rectus, okay, and also oculomotor nerve innervates the medial rectus, inferior oblique, this one, inferior oblique, as well as inferior rectus, okay. So 4 muscles. And what will happen, the eye movement could be different types, right? First, functionally we can say voluntary eye movement and involuntary. Okay, most of the time we move the eye voluntarily. Okay, so to move the eye to the point of interest, like if some you are looking at someone, now if you see that another person is approaching towards you, you voluntarily move your eye, right? And moving from, if this is point A, point of interest A, now if you think somebody important is coming towards you, this is you here, and you move your eyes, both eyes, from this point or this person of interest to this, and remember both eyes will move, right, together, both eyes move together. So that movement, sudden movement, is called saccade, saccadic movement or saccade. So from point A to point B, that first quick sudden movement of the eyes, and you know that both eyes move simultaneously, parallel, right, same way. So that's why this is called conjugate eye movement, voluntary eye movement is the saccade. Make sense? Okay. Another voluntary is pursuit. Pursuit eye movement is not sudden. If I ask you to fix your eyes here, okay, and then I ask you to follow the movement of this object, so slowly I am moving this object and you are tracking it, following it, okay, slowly moving, and that is called pursuit type eye movement. Your both eyes are moving here too, right? So conjugate, okay. And vergence is the movement of the eye when you fixate your eyes on something, fixating the eyes. So this is your right, and this is your right eye, this is your left eye, right? So if I show you my finger and ask you to fixate your eyes, you move your eyeballs in opposite direction, right? This eye will move this way and this eye will move this way to fixate your eye, okay. So that is the vergence or fixating type eye movement, move opposite direction. Now in case of saccade, you see when you move from this point to this point, this eye is moving laterally. However, this eye is moving nasally, that means medially. Make sense? So not same muscles are working, right? So to move this muscle, right eye, your right eye is moving laterally, at the same time your left eye is moving medially. So two different sets of muscles are working together, but they are working in coordinated fashion. So it is a kind of complex, coordination function. Not necessarily the same groups of both eyes, the same groups of muscles are working simultaneously, two different sets of muscles, right? So most of the cases we move the eyes horizontally, so horizontal conjugate movement, but also conjugate movement could be vertically if I move the object from here to here. That is the vertical conjugate movement. Okay, and microsecond is if I move step by step, like very short distance, like here to here, here to here, suddenly. So that is the microsecond. Interestingly, involuntarily, our eyes are moving in microsecond, in very fast and in very small movement, and human eyes move like 100,000 times per day. Just think that without our knowledge, to refresh the picture frame. If eyes don't move in microsecond or very fine movement, very fast, and these many times, the things will get fade. So to refresh the signal, your eyes need to move, although you don't see it, you don't notice it, right? So that is very important. Okay, 3 times per second. Okay, so that's about the eye movement, and you already know which muscles are controlled by which nerves and in which direction they move. Okay, now one thing here, you see, this is your eye and this is the pupil. Right, that is the pupil, and you see the eyelid. If I draw the eyelid, this is the upper eyelid. Makes sense? And cranial nerve lesion, or if the cranial nerve damage occurs, then what we see? We see the paralysis of the eye muscles. Okay, if oculomotor nerve, this one, is damaged, then what we see, that drooping eyelid that happens, because oculomotor nerve innervates the superior rectus and inferior oblique. So remember, inferior oblique moves the eye upwards, gives the tone to keep the eye upwards, as well as superior rectus, right? So superior rectus and inferior oblique both have to keep the eyeball upwards, and others also, the tone of other muscles. All these 6 muscles tone are maintained by the cranial nerves, and these tones together work from different directions to keep the eye in right position in the orbit or orbital fossa. Now if superior rectus paralysis occurs and inferior oblique paralysis occurs, then the muscle tones are lost. So when these muscles are paralyzed, they cannot hold the eyeball upwards. That pressure or tone is lost. So what will happen? The eyeball will drop downwards. Makes sense? And you will see the eye is downwards, and this is the pupil, and also Another muscle is innervated, which is the palpebrae superioris. Levator palpebrae, levator that means it lifts the upper eyelid. Levator palpebrae muscle. This one goes to the eyelid. This is the eyelid, upper eyelid, and pulls it upwards. Okay, but when this muscle tone is lost, this muscle is innervated by oculomotor. So when this muscle is paralyzed, then the eyelid will drop, drooping of the eyelid. So eyelid will close a big part of the eyeball. So it may even completely close the eyelid. Okay, so that happens in paralysis of the oculomotor nerve, and so you will see the pupil is not in the center but more downwards, and this is called ptosis. Okay, droopy eyelid. So few things you learned, right? Those are few important things. So let's stop here.